to allow more attendees to join. In the meantime, please feel free to tell us who you are and where you are calling in from in the chat function. Also, please note we do have live interpretation for this session, and that is in Portuguese and Spanish. Please feel free to use the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen to access those languages. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to the UN Global Compact Business and Human Rights Accelerator. This is the global session where we will be talking about the round 3, which is coming up in 2025. On this call today is myself. I'm Nicole Solomons. I'm the global lead for the Business and Human Rights Accelerator, and our colleague Mairead Kier from our very important partners Shift, who have been with us in this process from development and through into delivery over the past 2 rounds, and we are now heading into round 3. So before I hand over to Mairead in a few slides, just our content of the session today, or the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about the context, why this is important, about the accelerator itself, look at some of the previous rounds, some of the outcomes, then move on to just a few of the frequently asked questions, and then open for live Q&A. We did have a session earlier today. It was, we ended a little bit earlier. So, please feel free to put those questions into the Q&A and we will get to them at the end of the session. But for now, let's move into the content of today. And for me, the quote that you see here from the late John Ruggie is really the essence of the Business and Human Rights Accelerator. Because as the quote says, and I'll read it out, no company that I know of has ever said we don't respect human rights. My question was, how do you know that you respect human rights, and can you show that you do? Do you have systems in place that would allow you to back that claim? And so when we look at the human rights due diligence process that is modeled within the accelerator, the aim is to give businesses exactly those tools to be able to know and show that they respect human rights. And of course, the idea of human rights is absolutely simple and profound. That every human being deserves to be treated with dignity. And we know that businesses across the world are starting to understand their responsibility to respect human rights. There is still, however, quite a gap. And we'll see that according to the World Benchmark Alliance, 90% of companies are not even halfway to meeting fundamental societal expectations on human rights, decent work, and ethical conduct. And if we think that 80% of companies score a 0 on the initial steps of human rights due diligence, namely identifying, assessing, and taking action on their human rights risks and impacts, talks exactly to the quote of being able to know and show. And then only 27% of companies involve rights holders in the human rights due diligence process. So in terms of business understanding, they have a responsibility, but where we are currently, there is quite a gap. So I will hand over to Mairead to talk to us a little bit more about the business context.
Sure. Thank you very much, Nicole, and hello to everybody. Mairead Kier is my name. Nicole mentioned that I work for an organization called Shift. Shift is a mission-driven, not-for-profit, focused on bringing the UN guiding principles on business and human rights to life. And we do that by working with a range of partners. So we work with businesses like yourselves, we work with civil society actors around the world, we work with government partners and so on. And each of those different stakeholders have a role to play when it comes to breathing life into the UN guiding principles and really implementing them. So when we think about human rights risks and we think about drivers, there are a number of reasons why businesses need to pay attention to this topic. On the one hand, we know that civil society, customers, end users of products, governments, investors all have a set of expectations when it comes to businesses. They expect businesses to do the right thing, but more mindfully then to take steps to prevent, ideally, human rights impacts, and then to manage them when they occur. So there's very much a driver related to external stakeholder expectations, as well as the fact that businesses themselves want to do the right thing, and employees within organizations are also a key stakeholder. The other thing is that managing human rights risks, or as we talk about them, risks to people, we know that human rights risks, when they get to a certain level of severity, can also become risk to the business. So there's a very strong imperative for businesses to get a handle on what the potential or the actual risks to people look like, where they're happening across the business's value chain, and ideally take steps to prevent them and then to manage them when they arise, right? So it's very much a key part of risk management, enterprise risk management. But then there's also the responsibility side here, which lends itself to this slide, which talks about legislative expectations and legislative developments. And since 2011, when the UN Guiding Principles were first endorsed at the Human Rights Council, there has been a significant evolution of legislative developments around the world. You can see a number of them focused on North America. Quite a bit has been happening in Europe, and there's some burgeoning activity in the Asia Pacific region too. So there's been quite a bit of a development over time. And what you will find through this accelerator is a focus on some of the most recent legislative developments, specifically in Europe, and specifically focused around the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that's highlighted in yellow, and then also the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. So both of those are very significant to businesses that are large businesses that are doing business in Europe, but then also will have a kind of a ripple effect on those businesses' supply chains, potentially customers, all of that. So we're going to, through the 6 months of this program, we're going to be drawing the connections between the UN guiding principles and the key elements of these legislative developments, because there is very substantial alignment between the two. And that's why this program focuses on the implementation of the UN guiding principles, because it gets businesses to where they need to be to meet these legislative developments. So yeah, so that's just to give you a sense of where we're going to be with legislation. I mentioned the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. This came out of a 6-year effort that was led by Professor Ruggie, whose photo you saw earlier in the slide. And we will take time through the accelerator to explain the core concepts of the guiding principles, and then to talk about very specifically Pillar 2, which you see here in front of you, the corporate responsibility to respect human rights. But before I do that, it's worth saying that the guiding principles encompass 31 principles spread across 3 pillars. The first one says that the state has a duty to protect human rights, and it does that through legislation, through the court system, and so on. That doesn't change. That's still the duty of the governments. Pillar 2 says that the corporates or businesses have a responsibility to respect human rights. And then the third pillar says that those people who have been harmed by business activity should be able to access effective remedy. And those three pillars make up these expectations under the guiding principles. The pillars are independent of each other, but at the same time, they're interdependent. An important piece for businesses to know is that if the state fails in its duty to protect human rights, businesses still have a responsibility to respect human rights. And again, we'll touch on that because there are tensions that come with that for businesses operating in, certain parts of the world where potentially the rule of law is not very strong. But we'll touch on that through the accelerated program. So that's just kind of setting out the UN guiding principles, the international standard to which this program is going to be focused on. On the next
Fantastic.
slide, back to you.
Yes. So when we then look at how does the accelerator answer to this very important context that we've been discussing, to know that the Business and Human Rights Accelerator is a 6-month program. And the aim is really to move companies and move businesses from policy to action with respect to human rights and labor rights. And the high level objectives that we will focus on is firstly to set the baseline so that companies know where they are, understand the alignment or their alignment in terms of the UNGPs, then to set the bar. So in terms of where they are, moving or changing that mindset or perspective from risk to business to risk to people. We would like to then obviously close that gap in terms of where the business is and where they'd like to be. We support business to align with evolving legislation, and Mairead has just spoke quite a bit about that. And then, of course, in a program like the Accelerator, it is about connecting and learning. So there is lots of opportunity for business to actually then connect with peers in the local sessions that they also attend. If we then look at, as a business, what you would learn, really how to identify your responsibilities in respecting human rights and labor rights. So in terms of understanding that responsibility and where across the value chain that the risk may lie, how to establish or update an ongoing human rights due diligence process. So for some organizations, it could be that they are just starting out and actually need to establish that process. But for some, they might have something going. And this is a way to also iterate what they are doing and to test what they are doing. You will also learn how to report and communicate on how to manage your human rights impacts. And here we include the communication on progress and any other public disclosures that you might have as an organization. The outcomes, absolutely clarity over where you are as a company on this journey. Understanding of what it's going to take for you to meet those expectations, because depending on where you are on the journey, the gap might be small or the gap might be bigger. You will absolutely have tools to assess your salient human rights impacts. And in fact, we've had really good feedback in terms of a workbook that Shift developed, and our participants use this workbook and work through it throughout the program. So that's an excellent tool that you will have. You will have a clear understanding of stakeholder engagement and how to go about engaging your stakeholders. You will have an action plan at the end of the program. In fact, one of the mandatory requirements to complete the program is an action plan on at least one of those salient human rights risks. You will have a network of peers, whether it is locally in the country, in the network that you are participating, or broader. And then participants that complete the program will also have a certificate demonstrating their completion of the program. So just in terms of those 6 months, when we look at that 6-month program and what it's going to cover, it's approximately 1 stage per month. And within that, you'll see that we really do walk you through the human rights due diligence process. So at the start, it will really be about the core concepts, and ensuring that you understand the UN guiding principles and the human rights due diligence process. Once you have that understanding, we then move on to stage 2, which is really about understanding your value chain and developing a list of potential risks that your company could be involved with. In stage 3, we look at prioritizing those risks because you might have many, there might be 5, there might be 50. And so it is about prioritizing for action, and then also understanding how your business is involved with that risk, whether it is cause, contribution, or linkage. In stage 4, we look at action and evaluation. So once you understand what your risks are, you have now prioritized. We then look at how you can take action on that risk that has been identified. And with action, also then metrics. How are you measuring the action that will be taken? In stage 5, we look at communication and engagement. So what does effective communication look like? And how to meaningfully actually engage your affected stakeholders. I think this is a really important part of the process, and we've had good feedback in terms of participants now understanding how important that is. And then in stage 6, remedy and grievance mechanisms, understanding when remedy is required, what appropriate remedy is, and then, of course, how to implement effective grievance mechanisms. So throughout the 6 months, you will walk all of these stages till eventually you have this action plan at the end of the process. When we look at that on a timeline, we are currently in company sign-up mode. And so you have till the 20th of December to sign up for the accelerator. I will post the link in the chat here after. And we will actually start with the program very early February 2025. We will go all the way through till about July, where we will do a closing session. But to mention that when it comes to the action plan, you will have till September to finalize that action plan, because it's so important that it is discussed within the organization and that it's a real robust action plan that can actually be embedded as well. So you'll see here, I spoke about those 6 stages, and those are the global deep dives that you see starting out in February and then working its way all the way to June. And the other thing you will see here is the Ask the Expert sessions. Those are very specific sessions that are topical. And so again, something that is really of concern to companies we know right now is this evolving legislative space. And so the very first Ask the Expert session will be about evolving legislation. And so you will be able to understand how that is going to be impacting or is impacting your organization. The second Ask the Expert session is in partnership with the ILO, the International Labour Organization. And there it's literally you are asking the expert, about all of the labor-related issues you might be concerned with, and getting live answers within the session. And then our third Ask the Expert session is going to be about the environmental human rights nexus and how these topics intersect. And we know that that is important to companies right now, but also moving forward. So we will touch on those in these extra Ask the Expert sessions. Then to also note, part of the foundation of the program is e-learning or on-demand learning. There is an e-learning course that you will be expected to complete. There are 4 modules in the course, and these are how to operationalize the UN guiding principles. So you will need to complete that at your own time, but it will have to be completed before the end of the accelerator. And then, of course, peer learning takes place all the way throughout the 6 months. This is really up to the country networks that you are participating with. But it could be 3 sessions, it could be 6, and that's really up to the network. Those sessions are usually held in the local language as well. So please do, check to your local network and find out how they will be managing these peer learning sessions so that you understand what to expect within the accelerator. And then I'll briefly want to talk about the last 2 rounds. As I said, in 2025, we will be walking into round 3. We have completed 2 rounds so far. The very first one was the launch of the accelerator, and we started company recruitment for that in September 2022. And the program concluded in July 2023. We had 57 or companies across 57 countries were represented, hundreds of companies and over 1,000 participants were involved. Some of the programmatic outcomes, you'll see that hundreds of action plans were submitted. And please note that action plans are confidential. They are your working document. Really, it is what we want you to be embedding within your organization. So that does not get made available publicly, but what we will do is ask yourselves as participants then, if we think it would make a great case study or case example. We did find that many participants recommended the accelerator to others. And I think a really nice one is that 92% of participants were actually in the process of building out action plans since they had started the accelerator. So we know that it is moving participants from just having a commitment to actually taking action. So that was round one. If we have a look at round two, you'll see that our scope and scale increased, and we're hoping to do that again with round three as well. With round three as well. Companies represented from 64 countries, over 700 companies, and over 1,500 participants. Over 97% of participants recommend the accelerator. Over 700 action plans have already been submitted. And, there are, for example, 95% of participants have or are revising the action plan based on the salient human rights issues identified. So some good feedback from the previous rounds, and we hope to carry that into the next rounds. So then just briefly looking forward at 2025, you're wondering if where you are based, does the local network or the country network in that country, are they running it? And so let me show you who are running the accelerator for 2025. So these are the countries. And so hopefully you see the country that you are based in this list. However, if that is not the case, so the local network in the country where I'm based is not running the accelerator, you do not have to be concerned. If you are a Global Compact participant company and it's not being run in the country where you are based, you can then sign up for the global track. I will be running that global track, and so I will see the sign up coming through. I will also post the BHR Accelerator email address in the chat in just a moment while I hand over to Mairead, so that you can send any further questions that you don't put into our chat today, and I will be able to answer that on email as well. But back over to you, Mairead.
Thank you. So a question we commonly get is who should be participating in this accelerator program and how much time do we need to give to it? So we have set out the roles here. This is our recommended structure, and this is what we ask businesses to commit to through the program. So on the one hand, we ask for an ambassador for every participating company, and then 2 participants. So if we look at the ambassador, what's the function of the ambassador? It's really to be the champion for this program within the organization. It's to help the participants, on the one hand, think through some of the decisions that they're going to need to make, just I guess line up discussions internally as they're thinking through, for example, which issues are we going to prioritize for action? And it's opening doors to other decision makers within the organization. So the ambassador is really to be a champion, but it's also then kind of preparing the organization for this embedding role, which you've heard Nicole talk about a couple of times already. Big transformation needs to be embedded through the organization, and this is a very key function of the ambassador. So that's a key role, and we think that person will probably need to participate about 10 hours over the 6-month period. They will, of course, be very welcome to join the global deep dive sessions. They can join a number of them, but there will also be potentially 1 or 2 sessions set up specifically for the ambassadors. They may also be interested in coming to some of the Ask the Expert sessions, but we're thinking approximately 10 hours. Then secondly, 2 participants, and these participants are going to be the sort of the mainstay of the program over the 6-month period. On the one hand, we're looking for practitioners, people who are really working on business and human rights on a day-to-day basis. It could be that they sit within the sustainability team, could be they sit in corporate affairs, or maybe procurement, or maybe legal or human resources or risk. But we would like, we think it's useful within this structure in the program to have people from 2 different parts of the organization participating. So somebody from the main human rights management function and a colleague from another function. That together, these 2 participants are going to join the global deep dives, participate in the peer learning sessions with the local country network or with Nicole and Global Track, and then we'll be doing some homework in between each session, and ultimately we'll produce the action plan at the end of the program. Now, it could be that, you know, both participants are not able to join every session, and that's why, you know, this has been very carefully created for 2 participants, so that there can be a little bit of sharing of the commitment across those 2 people. We anticipate about 50 to 60 hours across the 6-month program, and they'll join sessions like these, the opening session, the closing session, and so on, and the Ask the Expert sessions in between. All right, so that's what we recommend. Sometimes we get asked if we already have a human rights due diligence process, should we join the accelerator? Is it still useful? We think yes, because even the companies that Shift has worked with since 2011, even those leading companies would say that their human rights journey is never done. There's always something that changes. You know, they may move to another geography, there may be a new product, there may be a new set of suppliers they need to work with, and every time there's a kind of like a contextual change or business activity change, there's often a range of potential risks. So there's always something else to think about, something else to learn, an opportunity to see what other companies are doing, an opportunity to deepen your knowledge on specific issues and so on, and to just get ideas and be inspired. So we think this is a very valuable program, and we hear about companies who participated in round 1 and sent people back again in round 2, different people within the organization, because they really saw the value of continuing to learn more. Will joining the accelerator prepare our company for the EU directives? Yes, it certainly should. That's our intention. So on the one hand, Nicole showed you what the key topics are for the program through those 6 stages. And into each of those, we're layering in the relevant pieces connected to CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and then also the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So we're going to be making those connections and helping participants understand what the requirements are. At the same time, the first Ask the Expert session is going to be focused on legislative development. So that's really an opportunity in February to bring a whole bunch of questions with you, and to ask one of my colleagues some very specific questions that will help you with that. What's the benefit of combining companies from different sizes and sectors? Actually, again, we have found the experience from the last couple of years has been that there's always something to learn. Businesses are always interested in learning from what other companies are experiencing and then what they're doing about it. And we find actually that we can really inspire, even if it's examples of multi-sector initiatives or bilateral activities or activities between a number of companies, maybe at a sectoral level, together with a civil society organization focused on a particular issue or in a particular geography. There's always a lot. So, it's great to bring organizations together, and this becomes a very rich discussion within the peer learning sessions, that are led typically by the local country networks. So you'll get a chance to learn from companies of different sizes and different sectors, and hear about what others are experiencing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mairead. We will open for any other questions that you may have. Please do pop that in the Q&A. But I thought while we, see if there are any questions, I was thinking of the session that we had this morning and two questions that come to mind. The first one was about more than two participants or more than two employees per company participating in the accelerator. So I thought I'd address that one quickly. What we would like to do is, and there are, I'm sure, many employees within a company that would be involved in the human rights due diligence process because it is so cross-cutting. But what we would suggest is that nominate two employees to be on the program. Those are the two participants that Mairead was talking about. But then also try and develop or create a bit of a work group inside the company. And so as these two participants attend the sessions, they can download the resources, download the workbook, and then actually work within the organization, within a working group, and really discuss when it comes to identifying those risks so that you really have a robust conversation when it comes to prioritizing and then when it comes to taking the actions as well. So only two participants on the program itself. That would be excluding the ambassador. So you'd have three with the ambassador. But then if there are any others, rather look at starting a internal working group that can support the work that the participants are doing inside the program. Another question that came up was about the cost of the program. There is not necessarily any extra cost if you are a Global Compact participant already. However, I must say that there may be some very few networks that do charge a small fee to cover some of the other costs. So do please talk to your network in country just to make sure if there are any minimal costs or not. So those were the two questions that I thought of. And then I see a question in the chat. Okay, do you want to take that one, Mairead?
Sure. You mean the question about the timing? So typically, Benoit, we hold each one of the global sessions twice. So we will typically organize them for 9 a.m. CET and then 10 a.m. ET, US time, Eastern time. So 3 p.m., 4 p.m. CET. So 9 a.m. 4 p.m. CET for European time. But there are two opportunities. The interesting about those is that there will be simultaneous translation available during those sessions. In the morning time, it typically tends to be French and Russian, I'm right? And then in the afternoon, it tends to be Spanish and Portuguese. Is that correct, or just Spanish?
That's correct. That's correct.
Spanish and Portuguese.
Then we have a question in the Q&A. Can you please briefly explain again the procedure regarding the action plans at the end of the accelerator? So I'll do that. Throughout the accelerator, you have a workbook that you will start working on, and I think that would be probably from around stage 2 of the accelerator. And in this workbook, you will start including your the list of risks that have been identified. There is a heat map in it, so you will start using it as a workbook, but you will work through it throughout the process. At the end of the program, however, we offer a template. So it is a PowerPoint template. But what we would like is that you narrate this process in your action plan. So you will say, we are company ABC. This is a little bit about what we do. And these are the risks that we've identified. This is how we went about prioritizing. These are the actions that we're going to be taking over this amount of time. So you then, within the action plan, put together, the 6 months of work that you've been doing, and tell us and show us how you've actually modeled the process, or put down the process that has been modeled within the accelerator. You then submit that at the end of the program, and by submitting that, that shows that you have completed. The networks will have a look at the action plans that have been submitted. Again, they are only for the Global Compact's eyes. They will not be made publicly available. And if you have followed the process, we will then come back to you and ask if there's a possibility for a case study or a case example. But it's really, Vanessa, for you to use inside your organization and hopefully actually start embedding those actions that you've outlined in the action plan. Colleagues, are there any other questions? Mareira, I don't know if you can think of the other questions of this morning.
Somebody asked if the program would help them score better in benchmarks. They particularly mentioned EcoVadis. I thought it was an interesting question, and the response really is that we're not orienting this program in order for businesses to score better in benchmarks. However, benchmarks now tend to look to see if businesses are aligning their processes with the expectations of the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Therefore, by the end of this program, all of the participating companies will understand, on the one hand, what their gaps are with respect to alignment with the guiding principles, and then through the program, we'll have modeled the steps that are required in order to be able to align. So, there will be a lot of learning. And if the participating companies are following the process and then taking those learnings back internally to their working groups and their colleagues, and actually starting to implement some of those learnings, then they are going to score better in those benchmarks, and particularly you think about the likes of the World Benchmarking Association, but potentially also the EcoVadis and others. So that's not our intention, but it's a very happy byproduct of this process.
Fantastic. I've just thought of another one. There was a question about academics, consultancies, um, yeah, and the role in the accelerator. And so just to say, the accelerator is developed with business in mind. And throughout the 6 months, we're going to be modeling the human rights due diligence process. So if you are an organization that is a participant of a company or business participant of the UN Global Compact, it is absolutely suitable for you. It doesn't matter the size of your organization. But there is an expectation that you actually model that process within your own organization. So, and there was a question about a consultancy. Please do speak to your network in country, because possibly, they might be looking for some partnering, volunteering, or expert speakers. And that would be the place for a, consultancy. But when it comes to the program of the accelerator, it's designed for business and to model the human rights due diligence process within your business so that you can embed it. So that's quite an important distinction. There's another question from Benoit. Could the e-learning be done by more employees in addition, not to shortcut the workload, rather to increase? Absolutely, Benoit. In fact, the e-learning is open. So it is not only for participants of the BHR Accelerator, they have access to that anyway. So as a Global Compact participant, the employees in your organization have access to that e-learning. And while I do that, I am going to post the link.
There was also another question earlier about the
Yeah, please go ahead.
about the cost of the program, whether there was an extra cost, and Nicole confirmed that there isn't, as long as you're a UN Global Compact member company, there isn't a specific cost for the program. If you're not a member company, there will be, or there is
Or
likely
you'll
to.
have to join. You'll have to join the Global Compact. Yeah. I have just posted into the chat the link to the Business and Human Rights page where you will be able to join the accelerator as well. Okay. Colleagues, if there are no further questions, thank you so much for joining us. The recordings will be made available to all that have registered, and I think much broader than that as well. Thank you so much, Mairead. Thank you to our interpreters, and thank you, Hirana, for all of the background work as well. Colleagues, we hope to see you